Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be when you are joining us. My name is Charisse Alexander, your host of Your Collective. On today's episode, I am joined by Kelle Sparta, who is also known as the Spirit Doctor. Kelle is a transformational shaman, energy healer, and spiritual catalyst who helps high performance individuals break through emotional blocks and assisting them in aligning with their soul's purpose. I never love to steal people's thunder of how they really want to introduce themselves. So that's all that I'm going to say. I'm going to turn it over to Kelle so she can share more about who she is and how she got to where she is. And we'll dive into today's episode a little bit more. And actually, before we dive in, what I'll tell you about today's episode is that the idea for today is to help those out there who might realize that they have some spiritual gifts and they're not entirely sure what to do with it. Or maybe you had an awareness of your spiritual gifts and they scared you, so you turned them off. And so Kelle's going to talk to us a little bit more about what to do if you want to really tap in to what those gifts are and where to go from there. So without further delay, Kelle, please tell us all about you.
Well, thanks for having me on the call, Charisse. So I like to think of myself as the person who combines all of the different silos of your spiritual education. So, there's Reiki over here, and there's wellness over here, and there's acupuncture over here, and, Chinese medicine, and there's so many different silos, and they all use different languages, right? And so, one of the benefits is that I started this journey very, very early in life. And so you were talking about my mom, or you were talking about what was effectively my mom, right? So you said people who had their gifts and they got scared of them and they shut them down. So my mom was that person. And so when she saw me talking to ghosts in my crib when I was like 6, 8 months old, she was like, okay, we got to get her trained up, because I don't want her to have to go through what I went through, which was she turned them off and then she could never figure out how to turn them back on again. And so she was like, nope, we're going to make this normal for her. We're going to make it easy. We're going to make it go. So from the time I was like 5 years old, she was bringing home Seth and Ram Dass and Abraham Hicks and JC Knight. And we were doing self-hypnosis classes. I could do it by myself by the time I was 10. I could read tarot cards by the time I was 12. We were doing psychic development classes like mad. It was just wild. And so my entire childhood was doing this whole process. And as a result, it's in my bones in a way that it isn't normally for people, right? And it's so funny because people ask me, they were like, oh, when did you start doing coaching? And I was like, well, I have high school yearbook signatures that read like client testimonials, right? And so it's not what I do, it's who I am. So it's been a long, long journey. I'm 55 now, so I've been studying for 50 years, right? It's a long time. And a lot of what I do, I'm actually right now, I'm really focused on working with the 100,000 people who are here to uplevel the planet, to help them step into their wisdom and their power and their purpose, and to help them develop the skills that they need in order to make that happen. So whether that's additional spiritual skills or doing more personal growth work so that they can step out of that wounded healer dynamic, or doing additional business skills or facilitation skills, right? Energetic skills. And so, I work with them on all of it, because it is a holistic process to be able to step into that power and purpose and complete your mission on the planet. And so people often ask me, they're like, how do you know if you're in the 100,000? And it's like, oh, here's the thing, right? If you had your spiritual awakening and you woke up and you went, oh my God, I've got this huge mission. It's massive. I don't know what it is. I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't know what I need to do to prepare for it. But I know one thing, I'm late. If that was your experience of your awakening, congratulations, you're one of the 100,000.
One of the 100,000. I'm owning
Yeah.
it. I have to ask, where did the number one? Because I think I told you, I heard someone had said they'd missed a zero. They'd said it was 10,000. Where did the 100,000 come from?
Straight from spirit. And
Okay.
I'm not the only person who's gotten that number. I know several people who also independently got that number and have that awareness as well. So spirit just looked at me and said, there are 100,000 of you on the planet. It's your job to bring them together and train them up. And I was like, okay, nothing like a small mission. Thanks for that. Yeah, I got it.
So you have this moment. And first, I just feel like we got to give accolades to your mom.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've done it, but there's so many parents that would just be like, no, I'm terrified and I don't want her to have that life. We're not gonna foster this, but to like really open the space and hold the space to allow you to like really be a child. And because let's face it, kids are super creative and you need a lot of that kind of energy in this work. And so for her to be like, no, I'm going to support her through this. Like, thank you, mom of Kelly, because what a beautiful, beautiful thing for her to help you with and grow through. So great. You have the moment where you're like, I have a huge mission. I have no clue what it is. That's literally what I said to myself. I have a huge mission. I have no idea what it is. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know, but I know. And I remember saying, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I know that this walk in this life is one of a spiritual nature. Somebody actually said everybody's is a spiritual nature. It's just whether or not you choose to do it in co creation or not. So now what? I have this mission. What's next?
Yeah. And that's the question, right? That's what everybody comes to, is that like, what's next? What do I do? And the short answer is that it's going to vary slightly by person, right? But there is a general pathway, right? So you have to do your personal growth work along with your spiritual growth work, or else one will limit the other. So if you don't do your spiritual growth with your personal growth, then you're going to run into an energetic that is locked in that you can't get to move no matter how much personal growth work you do. If you do your spiritual growth work without doing your personal growth work, you will come upon a limiting belief that will keep you from being able to step into your full power because you aren't addressing your personal growth work. And so they have to go hand in hand. And so there are two stages to the personal growth work that are crucial. The first one is finding mental, emotional, and energetic safety. Actually, three stages. But mental, emotional, and energetic safety is step one, because that's where you step out of the monkey mind and the inner critic and all of the yammer, yammer, yammer that's going on in your head, so that you can actually create the bandwidth to change. Until you can feel safe, you will not change. Without safety, there is no transformation, period.
Mm-hmm.
So, step two is to claim your space, set your boundaries, own your power, internalize your sense of value, and learn how to love yourself. That is solidifying your energetic container.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when you solidify your energetic container, you also solidify your identity. So, you're clear about who you are, what you want in the world, what's going on, what's the difference between you and somebody else, which for so many empaths is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you end and other people begin, and that sort of thing. The ability to manage your own energy field and take care of yourself, and really know your own value and worth in the world, and give yourself permission to have your power and treat yourself as the beloved in your own space. Because if you don't do those things, then you don't have a solid enough container to hold what people want to go straight to, which is the shadow work.
Hmm.
And you're not
People
ready
actually
for
want to go
shadow work.
straight to that. I'm
Yeah, a
sorry.
lot of people do, because
People are like, let's sign me up for it.
yeah, they hear that that's what they're supposed to do and they want to go straight for that. I'm like, you're not ready for shadow work. Yeah, you need to get ready for shadow work. And so once you have a solid container to hold the shadow work in, then you enter stage three, which is stepping into sovereignty. Right. And sovereignty has a path as well. It requires you to learn lots of different areas of self inquiry. It requires you to map out your inner world so that you can now be sovereign over yourself and your own journey. Right. And so those are the combined energetic and personal growth paths, right? You do work with your energy during the process. You do work with the law of manifestation during the process. You do a lot of elemental stuff, learning how to do basic spiritual skills. So, managing your energy, protecting yourself, protecting your space, talking to your guides, basic divination, how do you do manifestations, some ritual skills, some connecting with the elements, being able to do some creation energetics, right? There's all sorts of things on an energetic level that you learn during that process, right? Because you need to have a solid foundation in understanding how the energetic world works, because you're walking into an entirely new world. It's like moving to another planet, right? You don't know how anything operates, you don't know where anything is, you don't know who anybody is, you don't know how to discern whether they're good people or bad people. You're walking into a whole new world with a completely different language, and you're trying to figure out how to navigate it. You need to learn how to do that if you hope to be able to step fully into utilizing that world to fulfill your mission. And so that's the 3 steps to getting ready to fulfill your mission. And then you start to learn the skills that are necessary to actually fulfill your mission. And so that will vary dramatically from person to person depending upon what the mission is.
Okay. So that was a lot.
Yeah. Can you tell I've
And
been doing this a long time? Yeah.
yeah, because you just made it sound like a breeze. And
Well, I can walk people through it in about 2 years.
so, thank you for that, because that begs the next question. So you wake up or you're awakening and you have this sense of there's something I need to do and I'm late, and they meander down this road because, for myself, it's like this intentional journey began 7 years ago. And it was like, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. I don't know who to talk to. So it was really much test and fail, test and fail. Okay, that works. Try that, and so on and so forth. So to cut down on that time, I don't even think that you can answer this question because you're talking about two things that you're working on in parallel. There's the personal growth and then there's the spiritual growth that go hand in hand. If somebody doesn't have someone like you, well, let's just say they have someone like you, generally speaking, because I know that for me, it's like a sense of I got to catch up because I got so much stuff to do. How do I catch up on all this stuff that I'm supposed to learn? What does that look like? You said you can walk somebody through the journey in 2 years.
Yes.
How?
So, all right. So here's the thing, right? And if you were going to ask what happens if you don't have somebody. So
Yeah, that
I
too.
grew up in this and I've been doing this for my whole life. And I started doing my hardcore spiritual journey when I was about 28.
Okay.
And that was 28 years ago now, right? And so it took me about 20 years, maybe a little more, probably a little more actually, because I started doing the journey hardcore in 28, but I knew stuff from before that, right? So
Hmm.
if you took the amount of time that it took me to get that, if somebody was hardcore starting from scratch, it would probably take another 5 years there, right? So I figure it's about 25 years of effort it took me to find all this stuff because the challenge isn't the work itself. The challenge is figuring out what you need and then
Yes.
who has the thing that's going to work and then doing the work. And
Hmm.
98% of the time is spent doing those first 2 pieces. And so what I did was every time I did this journey for myself. And every time I found an answer, I would write it down. And over the course of 25 years, I had this entire journey mapped out. And so what I've done is I've just taken out the empty space in between. And that's why I can do it in 2 years, is because 98% of the time is spent trying to figure it out what it was, who has the thing that will work. Right. And so I just took that and compressed it all into a journey. Now I have made it as fast as humanly possible. Trust me, I've tried going faster. We can't do it. Okay, it blows people up if you try and go faster. So we don't do that, right? But over the last 7, 8 years, I have been sharing this journey with people, and they are making quantum leaps forward in their lives. And it is a highly successful and highly powerful container, which only grows more powerful every single year because the energy of the program has built its own gestalt. So gestalt is the energy of movement through an energetic space. Any sort of process has its own gestalt. It's like you're just building the energetic of the process, right? So the more people you run through the program, the stronger the gestalt becomes, and therefore the more amplified the field becomes when you step into it. And so people who went through the program in the beginning did not go as far as fast as the people who are coming in now, even though it's the same program. And
When?
that's because once you step in, you're like engaging the energetic and just whoomph, off you go to the races, right? And so it's not as hard to do the work because you have the support of the energetic that's working with you through the process of all the people who've been successful before, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So they come to you. They go through the process. It's still, so I'm assuming then through that process, there, if you still aren't fully clear on what your mission is, then it will be clear by the time you are done that process, right?
Yeah. So what I
Okay.
tell people is that your mission on your purpose is the fullest expression of your authentic self. And so when you come into sovereignty, you are at the fullest expression of your authentic self.
Okay.
And so your
And
purpose
whatever that looks
becomes
like. Yeah.
evident,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Okay.
You step into a space of being willing to go where the universe takes you, and you have learned to surrender to allow the universe to navigate. And there's a whole process that you go through, and I know that you're like, I don't want to surrender, no surrender, right? It's okay, you'll get there, it's fine. I told my guides to screw off for the first 5 years of my process, so I understand.
Somehow I just heard and saw you doing an actual temper tantrum as an adult.
Yes, yes, pretty
Just
much.
leave me alone.
Yes. No, I'm not doing that. I don't know why you're telling me that I'm not doing it. I'm running my own life.
You can't make me.
You can't make me. Yeah. Which, by the way, I had a conversation today with a friend of mine who was looking at my guides and from the outside, and she said that she had taken them to task because they got lazy, and because I told them to go away so much. She said there's a whole group of my guides that just have been like, fine, we went away, it's fine. And she was like, oh, taking them to task. Get your butt back in here and get to work, right? So be careful how often you tell your guides to screw off, right?
Because they actually might listen.
Because they might listen and get
Yeah.
lazy. Yeah.
That's that whole be careful what you wish for.
Yes.
Okay, so I know I was listening to one of your podcasts. I don't know how recent it was, but it was one of these episodes where you're talking to someone about like all the gifts. And I actually thought the gifts were literally like five, right? So the ones we hear about: clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, clair, five. But in that podcast, I think you talked about like 20. I think it's about 20 that you talked about.
It might be a little bit more, actually.
Maybe it was
But yeah,
25, but there
it's
were
close
a
to that.
lot, way, way,
Yeah.
way more.
Yeah.
So
There's
can
four
you maybe,
categories.
yeah,
Yeah.
can we chat about that one a little bit?
Sure. So there are four categories of spiritual gifts. They're these are the most common, right? Now, it's not to say that this is a comprehensive list, because it's not. There's other things out there, but I was giving sort of a general overview. But you've got the messenger, who is the person who brings messages through. So that would include things like channeling and mediumship, and things, talking to your guides, and doing psychic readings and stuff like that. That's a messenger. Psychic meaning ESP, right?
Hmm.
That's
Yep.
a messenger. And
Yep.
so then you've also got the traveler. So the traveler would be things like dream walking, astral projection, remote viewing, walking in the astral itself, and doing work there. That's a traveler. And then you've got the energetic manipulator. And so, energy manipulator. And so what that means is that it's somebody who does like energy healing work or magic. They're a manifestation person, or doing any that they create thought forms, and they create golems, and there's all sorts of different things that they do. Anybody who's doing curses or blessings, that would be an energy manipulator. Okay. And then the final one is sensor. And all of our empaths are sensors, right? So everybody who's an empath is a sensor by nature. And that's things like I can read auras, I can read energy fields, I can do energy work with people and healing work. And it's anything that involves like entrainment, where you can bring yourself into energetic parity with someone else, right? And that sort of thing. That's a sensor sort of ability, right? And so you're using your own energy field to do that work. And so, will you have more than one? Yeah, you could. I actually have multiple fields that I work within. Are you going to be good at everything? No, you're not.
Yeah. And you don't need to be.
You don't need to be, right? I am actually of the opinion that I absolutely could put my hand through a wall and pull it back out again and have it be fine, except that I'm too attached to reality to let myself do it, right? On a core level, I know how. I just, my brain is like, no, that's a solid wall, right? my
Don't do
knowingness
it.
knows it's not a solid wall, right? But this is where we have to fight with ourselves sometimes, right? It's like, but I haven't bothered to have that battle with myself because I don't need to put my hand through a wall, right? It's not necessary, so I don't care to develop the skill. But at a core level, I know I could if I needed to, right? And so sometimes it's worth developing the skill and sometimes it's not. But the one thing you don't want to do is waste time on something that you don't have aptitude for and trying to develop it just because it would be cool, right? You want to spend time working on the things that you have aptitude for because that aptitude is there for a reason.
And that's a great point. Because, when you're so early in that journey, and I've had these conversations with people where it's like, and I find myself actually having this conversation with more and more people of late, where it's like they'll tell me about their dreams, and I'll be like, okay. And they'll say, oh, I think I dreamt this and then it happened. Or I haven't been dreaming lately. And I'll say, I'm pretty sure that you can turn that back on or work with that more. So when you're starting to like play in these different skill sets, like how do you, because there's so many more that I learned from that one podcast alone. How do you begin to, and a lot of my experience sounds like probably everybody else's, where it's just like you read and then you're like, okay, I'm going to try that. And you try it and you're like, okay. And then it just kind of takes you down this rabbit trail. So is that how people begin to develop these things? Like if they're not able to work with you, then what do you suggest when trying to figure out what your aptitude actually is?
So the first thing I'm going to say is don't go trying to figure out your aptitude before you have protections on yourself and your space.
Great point.
Okay.
Great point.
Because I see this happen a lot. And I see this happen with Reiki practitioners too, because what nobody tells you when you're starting into these practices is that the more you activate your psychic abilities, the more you activate your energy field, the brighter you become on the astral. And
Mhm.
so the average person is walking around the astral and they look like a shadow on the
Mhm.
astral. So there's like just picture of sea of shadow people on the astral. And then there's these bright lights of people who are fully people on the astral. They're not just images, impressions of people in shadow form. They're actually there, right? And when you're actually there, other things that are actually there notice you. And if you don't know how to protect yourself, those things can come and chew on you. Okay? And, if you're lucky, it'll be a low level entity that's just going to put you into a psychic loop where you're constantly miserable and unhappy because it feeds on misery and unhappiness, right?
Mhm.
That's the nicest form of something coming and chewing on you, right? If it's something higher level, if you have the potential to be a high level practitioner and you will make an impact on the world in a big way, some bigger things may come at you very early on in your process because they want to stop that from happening. They can see where
Yeah.
things are going to go and they want to short circuit it. Please do not start going and doing things before you have your protections in place. There's a reason why we do this in a specific order. I've having grown up in this stuff and not learned that stuff until later in life, I had a lot of things come and chew on me and come and attack me at times.
Yeah.
And, that's one of the reasons why people get scared and shut everything
Yes.
down is because
Yep.
they're like, oh, this thing was standing at the foot of my bed and staring at me and felt malevolent and it was bad. And, this thing came and inhabited a boyfriend. And then it was like weird and, stuff happens, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
And I
I've
don't mean to make
recently
light of it, but I've definitely heard those stories as well, where people just get freaked right out. And it's like, nope, shut down, forget it, never mind, I'm gone. I'm a shadow. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And so, I've actually got a program on my site that's called Discover Your Psychic Abilities. And I've got, you can either do the bundle or you can do the individual types that we talked about. This one of the four individual types, but included in that is how do you protect yourself? And you're not allowed to do the next piece until you say you've done the pieces of protection because I don't want you to get hurt. Right? It's like I literally, so I gotta tell you, I used to only allow this to be, I used to only allow people to get this when they were in the final stage of the work.
Mhm.
When
Yeah.
they were in that third stage of coming into sovereignty, I used to have this program there. And because so many people are waking up right now, further along the path in their spiritual gifts, they're like waking up going, I'm having prophetic dreams. I'm walking into other people's dreams. I'm having, I'm having something come and chew on me. I am, I mean, just big stuff.
Yeah.
25 years ago when I started teaching people this stuff, people were like, "Oh, I think I might like to talk to my guides or my angels." It
Yeah.
was very low level stuff.
Yep.
Now
Yep.
it's like I'm having things happen that I don't understand, and I can't.
Yep.
I don't even have the vocabulary for it, and I don't want to talk to anybody about it because they're going to think I'm crazy. And
Yep.
I don't want to be institutionalized. And I'm like, look, I promise you, I have seen things way crazier than whatever it is you're going to tell me. So feel free. And I am not a mandatory reporter. So even if I did think you were crazy, I'm not going to tell anybody. Right.
Right.
But I've never thought anybody was actually crazy. Let's just get to that. Okay. So because for most things, people are like, oh, this is happening. I'm like, yeah, that's sort of normal in my world. Right.
And thanks for bringing up the conversation around protection, because I remember saying to you that like the narrative that's sometimes out there around protection is, do you protect or not protect? Because of the idea being that if you protect, it's like saying you don't trust the divine, you don't trust to be protected. And then I shared with you, I'm like, well, that idea in my head went straight out the window. So let's talk a little bit more then about, okay, great, you're having whatever, it's the discovery piece. So you've said, okay, first you got to learn how to actually keep yourself safe on the astral plane.
Yes.
Now I want to play. What is that? Or not play. I don't want to make light of it because it's really important to not actually make light of it. Yeah,
I don't
play. We
know.
can have fun with
Yeah,
it.
you can play.
Okay.
There's actually podcast episodes. So it's so funny because in the first year of this podcast, I had a co-host and he was brand new to it. His girlfriend was the one taking classes with me, and he came to a Reiki class at one point and was like, "Oh, I love podcasting." I was like, "Oh, I need to start a podcast." So we did it together.
Hmm.
He I started the podcast with, okay, here's how things work and here's what not to do. Don't do
Hmm.
this, don't do that, don't do that. Don't And so like the whole first year was don't do this and don't and then he's like, is there anything I can do? And I was like, oh yeah, let's do a couple of episodes on that. And so there's actually 2 episodes on how to play in the astral is what it's actually called. And so, just like little hints and tips on how to get started doing energy work and magic and things like that. But things that were not too dangerous, how to work with your own energy and things like that, right? Learning how to bring your own energy up and bring it into a ball in your hands and things like that. They're not too hardcore. And so they're not going to brighten you up too much initially. So, yeah, you could learn how to lucid dream. That one's generally a safe one to do. Learning how to manifest. Manifestation is a pretty easy one because we're already naturally creative. Just doing it consciously doesn't actually change how you're perceived on the astral. It's just change from unconscious to conscious creation. That's a very easy one to do. So learning about the universal laws is a great one to work with. There's lots of ways to approach things, right? Um, there's so many different ways to approach the spiritual world. We're all looking at this massive diamond, and any particular practice is one facet of the diamond, right?
Hmm.
So you can come at it from a Wicca perspective, or a shamanism perspective, or a new age perspective, or a wellness perspective, or energy work, energy healing perspective. They're all very different, right? But they're all the same thing, right? And so the key is just to get started, getting into contact with your guides. And that's actually the most common podcast episode I have in the 400 episodes or something,
Yeah.
I think, that we have right now. I think there are 3 or 4 episodes specifically on how to talk to your guides.
Yeah.
And I do that on purpose because people are always like, I don't know how to hear my guides. And, they'll talk to me and they'll tell me what's going on. And I'm like, okay, I've just saw 6 ways in which your guides talk to you. And they were like, what? Yeah.
And let's dive into that then, because it's, to me, when I think about that, it's how you begin to build trust within yourself, which you and I have talked about, because the question that inevitably comes up within self is, did I really hear that? Did I really see that? Did I really feel that? And we question and we question and we question. So And I think one of the messages I've got is we're talking to you all the time. You're not listening. Like we're
Right.
talking through people, we're talking on TV, we're talking through music, we're literally all day bombarding you. The
Yes.
only thing I'm not doing is putting a sign in front of your face that says, yes, this is your sign, which
And
actually I've heard
sometimes they
happen to
do.
people.
Sometimes they do. Yeah.
Right. So how do
Yeah.
people recognize it?
Well, so the easiest thing to do as I have an engineer brain, right? So my
Mm,
brain categorizes and structures and whatever. The at its core, the thing that it's best suited for is pattern finding. And so I use pattern finding as a good indication of what's being trying to be said to me
yeah.
when I'm not hearing directly, right? And so, you'll see, six different ways in which the same thing is happening,
Yeah.
right? But now you have to be able to understand the symbology of what's happening. You have to be able to understand the higher meta of what's happening. So, if their dog comes and steals their food, and then they go to the store and somebody jumps the line in front of them, and then they try to pull out into traffic and no one will let them out in traffic, and so you're starting to see a pattern here.
Yes.
And
Something
the
is trying to
pattern
slow you
is
down.
actually it's I mean, if it was just the two and not the dog,
Yeah.
that might be true.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
with the dog, it's a different meaning,
Okay.
because what that means is that everybody comes before you, right? Dog gets to eat
See?
first, person gets
Yes.
to go in
Okay.
line first, everyone else gets to go first, everyone comes before you.
You're so lucky you have an engineer brain.
Say
I can
again?
see because I said you're so lucky you have an engineer brain because I would have seen that totally wrong, right? Or not quite right. Yeah.
So, but I mean, there's probably 15 other examples in your life over the course of a week that would fall into that. So if you want to just keep paying attention to see, sometimes you just got to tweak the message to get there. But that sort of thing is what you're looking for when you're looking for patterns, right? And so the other thing is that if you're questioning whether or not there's something that where you're hearing something and you're questioning whether or not it's your guides, or if you're making it up, if you get surprised by the answer, you're not making it up. You can't
Mhm.
surprise yourself.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's always a good indication is, hey, tell me something that would surprise me. And then they will. And you'll be like,
Yes.
I didn't know that. It's like,
Right.
there you go.
I think the really other obvious one is, and I love when I hear people say this, like, why does this keep happening? This happened and then this happened and this. I'm like, okay, so I'm pretty sure that somebody's trying to get you a message.
Yes.
I
Yes.
literally had it happen the other. It was to me, and sometimes it's so obvious. Like,
Yeah.
don't
We call that
overlook.
the clue by
Sometimes
to the forehead.
right?
Yes.
Sometimes it's super duper simple. Like, what was it that had happened? It was like if somebody keeps talking about the same book, like different people talking about the same book of an author I've never heard before. I'm like, somebody wants me to read this book because you're literally the third person this week who's told me about this book. So I got to go and read this book. Like, those are messages. So pay attention.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so you've got messages and they're coming consistently. And now we get to go. And I guess that's really the call on you to, like, okay, go down this road and really learn to trust what those messages are. Okay.
Yeah, and it's developing a relationship with your guides and
Hmm.
understanding, because at some point they're gonna, not in the beginning, not by any stretch in the beginning, but at some point they're gonna do to you what they did to me, which is they're gonna tell you to do something completely whack job. And you'll be like, you want me to do what? Right? So yeah, for me it was going on walkabout. They would not let me have a place to live. Literally could I applied so many different places, and the person who had been happy to have me live with him was like, nope, you can't come back. And I was just like, I was literally left homeless because I could not find a place to live, right? And so I was living on the couch of I had a teaching circle I was doing, and I was on a different person's couch each day of the week. I had a person up for each day of the week. And that went on for like 5 months. And then they were like, okay, time to go to this festival. And I'm like, okay. And they were like, and you're not coming back anytime soon. So you should get rid of that storage unit that you've got. And I'm like, okay. And so I called my friends and I scheduled the giveaway. And I said, here's the deal. You can take whatever you want, but you got to help me take whatever's left to the donation center. Right. And the day after I did that, I was at person number two's, my Tuesday person's house. And I sat down in her bathroom, opened a book, one of her bathroom reading books, to a random page. And it said, "The apprentice shaman will give away everything he owns just before he goes on his final vision quest." And I went, "Oh my God."
Is that when you told them, no, you can't make me?
No, I didn't do that then. I was fully aware that this is where I was supposed to be, and that I was not going to be given an option. So I was like, okay, here we are, right? But yeah, that's one of those sorts of things where sometimes that will happen. But that's much later in the journey, right? I
Mm.
had been hardcore on my journey for multiple years by that point.
Yeah, so don't get scared that you're going to be asked to do something that is going to
Yeah.
make you not want to do anything.
Yeah. But inevitably, they will ask you to do things that make no sense to you. Right. So
Mhm.
Kathy, my friend Kathy, talks about the fact that she had a friend who was a Jesuit priest. She had just made friends with him. And she kept getting this message to call him up and tell him about this bird and that what she'd seen with this bird. And she's like, this guy's going to think I'm nuts. What? He's a Jesuit priest. Why am I going to be giving him this message about this bird? Why would I talk to him about this? I like this guy. I don't want him to think I'm crazy. I just made friends with him. Why are you doing this to me? And they're
Yeah.
like, you got to tell him. You got to tell him. And they wouldn't let her sleep. And finally, she got up and left. And of course, she got a voicemail. And she's like, oh my God, I have to leave this on voicemail on top of it. So I'm just like, so there would be evidence that I said this, right? And she's just horrified. And
Everybody's going to see my crazy.
so she leaves this message and she's like, I don't want to do this, but spirit won't let me sleep until I tell you this. And it turns out that his grandmother was some kind of Native American, and that bird made it was something that was super important to him, and he needed the message, and he was thoroughly open to it, and it was wonderful, and they can bonded over it more, and but
You know how many
we
times
didn't
I've
know
heard of
that.
that happening? I've heard of that happening like across so many walks where people are just like they're, as you said, you're fighting with yourself because you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to walk up to this complete stranger, or in this case, someone I really, really like and I don't want them to judge me
Yes,
and do this thing I really, really don't want to do, but my spirit guides won't leave me alone until
yes,
I do this thing, right? So is there that, I imagine though that there comes the point, and I'm asking this directly to you, where it's like if you're given a direction, you don't even question it, you just go ahead with it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there
Okay.
comes a point where that's the case.
Okay.
Although sometimes you end up with a little bit of a spiritual eviction sometimes. So we moved from Boston to Richmond, Virginia,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
we did it so that we could buy a house. I was like, okay, it's time. I want to buy a house. This is going to be a more affordable place to do that. And we also were done with the snow. We were so done with the snow, right? And so we moved to Richmond, and there was a whole thing around Richmond. We were drawn there. There was like, we did not intend to move south of the Mason Dixon when we were doing it. We just
Hmm.
did not intend to move into the south because I was from the south, and it's a whole thing. So we were drawn there. And the time came to make the move to move again, and I was exhausted. I had been working too hard at my job, and I couldn't face packing everything up again because I am the expert packer because I grew up as a military kid, so I did all the packing because that
Yeah.
way things didn't break, right? And I just couldn't face it. I was like, I can't. So what happened? A pipe burst in our wall and flooded the apartment, and they had to have the remediation team come in and put everything in boxes so that they could take it out of the house so that they could replace the pipe and air out the rug and get rid of
Yeah.
the mold that they found and all the stuff. And we were shoved into a hotel with no end in sight because the cleanup company was just like sitting on their butts and not actually getting to it. And I was like, okay, well, everything's in boxes. It's not packed properly, but it's all in boxes, and it's going to take me a lot less time to pack it up now.
There's
So
that
let's just buy a
manifestation.
house, right? Now, this was November of 2019. And so yeah. And so we bought our house and moved in just before COVID shut everything down. And we moved from Boston to Richmond and in 2018. And that move forced me to create the podcast, the Spirit Sherpa podcast, right? And I realize we haven't told anybody what the podcast is. We've been talking about it this whole time. But I made the podcast because I'd been doing in-person classes in Boston before that. And
Yeah.
so the move, which I am certain that Spirit was like, now, time to move now. And that caused me to make the podcast, which caused me to have an income stream coming in so
Yeah.
that when I made the move, I would be able to continue to have income. And then I came down to Richmond and we stayed for a half a, we were gone for like a half a year longer than we should have been in that apartment, right? And then they were like, okay, time for you to get out. Here's the flood. Here's the hotel. You're stuck there for a month. Will you move now? I'm like, yes, I will move now. And so we get there just before everything shuts down and everybody's scrambling to go online,
Yeah.
but I'm already online
Yeah.
and I'm already set up.
Yeah.
And
You're
so,
good.
it's all good, right? So I'm like, are you kidding me? This is just beyond the pale.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's sort of the way that Spirit works, right? Like if I knew it was time to move and I was like, I'm too tired. And I was like, I can't box things up. They're like, okay, we'll box them up for you. Time for you to go. Let's go.
That's why I love that. It's like, okay, no problem. You can't pack? Okay, we'll take care of the packing for you.
Right?
I love that manifestation. I've totally talked about that with people on the podcast because I think sometimes people think that they can only manifest good things and the good things take so long. And I'm like, no, you really have to be careful I'm a words person, right? So I'm always like, watch your words, watch your energy, so on and so forth. And one friend was like, oh, okay. So if my car gets stolen, then I manifested that. I'm like, absolutely. I'm like, were
Yes.
you talking about wanting a new car? And he's like, yes. And I said, but were you clear on how you wanted that new car? He's like, no. And I said, so when Spirit comes and someone steals your car and now you have to go buy a new car, is that not you getting a new car?
Right.
Spirit's funny like that, right? You don't like it, but Spirit is funny like that. So I wanted to talk a little bit. We are going to talk about your podcast here, but before we jump to your podcast, what I wanted to talk about was working with people who are helping you to develop these gifts and how important it is to find the right people, right? So you're obviously one of the right people, but people can really go down a path that they don't want to go down or where they get misled with what that looks like or hit resistance or whatever the case may be. How do you find someone to work with?
So the first thing I'm going to say, I actually did an entire podcast episode on how to find a good spiritual teacher because this issue. But the first thing I'm going to say is trust your gut.
Mm-hmm.
If your gut at any time goes clunk or right, don't work with that person.
Mm-hmm.
That's number one, because your gut is always going to tell you. Now, I want to be clear that your gut may tell you to work with somebody who is messed up.
Mm.
Okay. I want to be clear that that could be the case. Every person I've ever talked to who worked with somebody who was messed up, right? They all come out going, oh, I learned so much from that.
Mm-hmm.
Did it suck? Yes, but I learned so much from it. So I want to be clear that your gut is not necessarily going to keep you from working with somebody who's messed up. It's just going to give you the lessons you need, right? And that's a different thing. You have to look at the world differently when you step into this process.
Yeah.
Now, from a head perspective, how do you notice when you're working with people? So there are two places where people come into working with others. And the first one is stage 3, and the second one is stage 5 and beyond.
Yeah.
So stage 3 teachers are people who are teaching to prove to themselves and others that they know this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they will be marked by, and I don't want to say that, this is a problem because it's a stage. Everybody who ends up being a high level spiritual teacher goes through this stage. I went through this stage. Everybody goes through this stage. You can still learn from them. You just have to know how to take it with a grain of salt.
Right.
And so this stage is marked by being afraid that they're going to have the wrong answer. So if you ask them a question and they get flustered, they're probably a stage 3 teacher. It's also often marked by, look at me, look how spiritual I am. I'm so good. I'm great. I'm the high person and you have to follow me and da 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 da. There's all this hierarchy and I'm so good. And, they seek out people who will be sycophants to them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Who will say, oh, you're so great, right? And if you're not one of them, you can find yourself out on the street on your butt with a whole host of things that they find wrong with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
They tend to be very vindictive when they evict people. So one of the best things to ask is, can you give me the name of somebody who no longer works with you? And I want to talk to them.
Yeah. Great
Okay.
way. Yeah.
If they won't give you that name,
Yeah.
then they're probably a stage 3 teacher. Okay. They may be a problematic teacher because, people finish working with me periodically and they're not mad with me when they leave. They were done. Right. And so, if you have somebody who is just done, then that's great. That's a great indicator that you have a good teacher because the person felt complete. They had gotten what they needed from the interaction and they closed and moved on. And that is a healthy completion process, right? Whereas if the person's like, oh my God, they rolled me over the coals. They told me I wasn't ready to lead. They told me I was a terrible person for going and that I wasn't committed to my process. I mean, I can't tell you how many of those stories I've heard, right?
Right.
Where the person's just like, I'm going to just rip you up and tell you that you're not doing your work because you're leaving me, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, now sometimes people do avoid the work by trying to quit the program. But when I have that conversation with somebody, the conversation is, look, at the beginning we said this would be a resistance point. I'm going to ask you to do the next lesson in the program before you decide to quit.
Mm.
Because typically it's the next lesson in the program that you're avoiding. And when you finish that lesson, come back and then we will have the conversation. And
Right.
inevitably they come back and they're like, yep, it was that. I'm like, okay, you're a sovereign being. You can quit it wherever you want. But I think this is a bad idea because you're in resistance because of this.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
which is different. That's what a
That's
that's what
part
a
of the
healthy
process.
teacher will do,
Yeah.
right? They're not going to say you suck. They're going to say maybe in resistance. Why don't you try this thing and then we'll see, right?
Right.
Because maybe it's not for you, but once you do the next lesson, you'll know.
Okay. Oh, and I guess suppose even just asking, right? Like when you feel like if you're doing it by yourself and you now feel like, okay, I don't know where to go next. Hey, guides, can you send me a teacher because I'm ready? Is as simple as it is. And, then just wait, I suppose. And then, like you said, you'll know
Yeah,
when
pay
that
attention.
teacher arrives. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pay attention moment because you'll feel that. You'll feel the resonance, right? There's a resonance that happens when you talk to the right person. And
Yes.
they start talking about things automatically that you didn't tell them, right? That
Hmm.
you're looking for and that happens.
Or you'll just feel it, like, even if
Or
that
you'll just
doesn't
feel it.
happen, but you'll just be like,
Yes.
"Oh, I was supposed to meet you." Like, I totally know somehow that I was supposed to meet you. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so there's following your gut, and this just seems like such a simple, well, I mean, I guess, and thank you, I guess I should say, for bringing up the point of, because I definitely heard you saying it on one of your other podcasts where it was like sometimes, and I've said this to people, where it's like sometimes you think that you're not supposed to go down this road, but not knowing what you don't want is as equally important as knowing what you do want. How do you know that if you don't experience what you don't want, right? Like a lot of what we experience is about relativity. And so when you talk about, it's like a total, I'm going to say it. It's a total mind fuck when you are
Hmm.
actually dealing in land of spirit, because it is not logical. It does not make sense. It only makes sense after the fact, which our logical brains have such a hard time with, which is like it's not linear. It's not tidy. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't really feel good a lot of the time. Like it's just like, why am I doing this? And the answer is because your soul is calling you to. That's really what the answer is. And so you eventually at some point go, okay, fine. Let's
Yeah.
do
I
this.
love the movie The Arrival for that.
Okay.
So if you watch the movie The Arrival, it's about an alien race coming to the planet,
Mhm.
but they experience life non-linearly.
Mhm.
And so when you can be with that movie, it can help you to understand what nonlinear experience is. And then that helps you to understand your guides and why they have the perspective that they have because they live in a nonlinear state because time space is an illusion that we opt into and when we come into these bodies, right?
Yep.
And so I love the movie The Arrival because if you energetically connect with that movie, that stuff, I am like this close. When I watch that movie, I'm like this close to living in that state.
Right.
Right? It's like there's whoever made that movie was brilliant because they've built the energetic of that. And I'm
Mhm.
just like, right, I can feel it. Right?
Yeah.
I'm like it's right there.
I gotta ask you because you've
Hmm.
said a few times like you've got an engineer's mind, and I would imagine that an engineer's mind makes it, and I could be wrong with this assumption, but that an engineer's mind actually makes it tricky to really dive into this and own it and surrender because engineers don't traditionally work in like, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Like it doesn't make any sense before. It only makes sense after when you get to reflect on it. So how did you do that? Like, because was it tricky? I get, even though with you had the support of your family and your mom and so on and so forth, like, was there still a challenge for you with that?
Yeah. So I tell people this. What I find is that the engineer brain is one piece of it, and then the stubborn is the other piece of it. Okay?
Oh, you never told me
So,
that.
well, I'm going to tell you now. So the stubborn is the other piece of it. So with the engineer mind, there's this need to categorize and structure and format and right. And what I did, I actually made a conscious choice when I was really stepping in at 28. I made a conscious choice to not go and study because I knew that if I studied, I would stay in my head. And so instead, I practiced and I felt into things and I chose things intuitively. And I purposefully did not look them up. And I would have other people around me who would say, "Oh, well, that's appropriate." And I'd be like, "Okay, why?" And they would say, "Well, I remember I was building out my store. I had a retail store, a metaphysical store, and I wanted to build some protections into the store. And I was looking for, ways to make things balanced energetically and whatever. And so I picked up a leaf off the ground with my friend who knows a lot of this stuff, and I said, I want to paint these leaves onto the floor. And he
Mhm.
said, well, that's appropriate. I'm like, why? And he said, well, because that's a red oak leaf. I said, okay, and he said, well, because oak is protective. And I was like, oh,
Mm,
okay. Didn't know that. But
right.
this is what I wanted.
Yep.
And then we're building, there's this center post in the store and it's ugly. And I'm like, I want to do something with this. He's like, well, we could make a tree out of it. And I was like, okay. And then, we're making the tree out of chicken wire. And the chicken wire is coming together and it's got a divot in it. He's like, oh, we're gonna fill that in. I'm like, no, 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 I want the divot there. I said, you know how some of those trees have that divot in them? And he said, you mean a lightning strike? And I was like, oh, is that what causes the divot? And he's like, yeah. He said, you want a lightning struck oak in the center of your store? And I was like, yeah, okay. And I'm like, why is that a problem? And he's like, because that's like the biggest protection you can get. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's what I want, right? And it was this ongoing thing. But that's how I did it. Is I stopped trying to learn it and I started leaning into to just intuiting it, and that helped me to turn off the engineer brain, right?
You totally just validated something for me because
Oh, good.
I think I even told you. I said, I'm working through something right now. And I said, I just feel called to like really just feel my way through it. Don't think about it, feel it. Don't logic it, feel it. And trust those and really using like in this last 2 years, I was telling somebody, I'm like, I've really learned to love my body, but for totally different reasons. Not because how she looks, not because of what she does, not because of how she looks, but because of how she speaks to me. When something doesn't feel right, I'm like, that landed heavy in my heart. I think I need to ask more questions about this. This is causing anxiety, and I'm not really sure why. I need to ask more questions about it. And that's where the love has genuinely come from for my body and this process that I'm in right now of not thinking through things, but really feeling through things is like really working that muscle. So thank you for validating that for me.
Yeah, happy to do it. And then the other piece is the stubborn, right?
Mm, yeah.
So the stubborn it's one of these things. Remember, I said I have too hard a hold on reality to stick my hand through a wall?
Yes.
That's the
Yep.
stubborn, right?
Yep.
It's like, know this to be true, stubborn, right? And that part is both the greatest gift and the greatest challenge to doing your spiritual work. The most stubborn
Okay.
people I know are the most powerful practitioners I know.
Okay.
And it's because when you are stubborn, you are capable of like pushing the rest of the world away and coming to a complete and utter focus in your mind. And you have a strength of will that comes from having been freaking stubborn, right?
Mm,
And there is
yeah.
that woof of, nothing will stand in my way come hell or high water. I call them my come hell or
Mm-hmm.
high water people, right? Come hell or
Mm-hmm.
high water, I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to blah, blah, blah. And that's the stubbornness coming out, right? And so it is a great gift in the fact that it allows you to do a lot of focus. But it's
Mm-hmm.
also a great hindrance because you are like, no, this is how it is. This is how the world works. And what do you mean it's different? No, I know this to be true. And this is the hill I'm going to die on. Right.
Yeah.
And so there's this back and forth that happens all the time. But if you can get over your attachment to reality. And so Kathy has a great way of saying this. She says, you don't have to believe, you just have to suspend your disbelief. And that
Mm-hmm.
is the best way for a stubborn person to do it, is just to suspend your disbelief. Just like if you were walking into a movie, you know those are actors on the screen, but you are suspending the disbelief that this is a real story and you're allowing yourself to be moved by the story. This is the same thing in magic. As you suspend your disbelief, you know that this energy isn't tangible, but it's freaking tangible now, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
having the experience that it's tangible, but it's not, but it is. But I'm going to allow myself to think that it might possibly be true.
Just
I
for a
don't have to
moment.
commit to it. I
Yeah.
just have to allow it to be possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the hard part with the stubborn piece.
That's one of a coach a while ago had said that, and I loved the way that that question or even that phrase of like what else is possible really shifts a lot, because it's like, I'm not asking you to commit. You don't have to, you don't have to commit. You can change your mind. But the question is, what else is possible? And I find that when we ask that question, then we lower our guard a little bit, as you're talking about, and allow for, well, what else is possible in this situation or scenario?
Yeah. My brain goes straight to Encanto. What else can I do? Right? I love Encanto, so I've watched it about a million times. So, yeah.
Just as we wrap up here, let's talk a little bit about your podcast. So, the podcast was started back in just before COVID, I think you said, is when you started the
2018 actually, because I
Okay, so
did it before
20
the
so a couple
move.
years
Yeah,
before
it
COVID.
was midsummer 2018. So and it was like June 20th or June 22nd, something like that. We did it on the summer solstice.
And so you started the podcast, and the purpose of the podcast was
So the podcast was designed so people go through stages in their spiritual evolution. And so you start off with there's got to be more to life than this, and then you go into the discovery phase of, well, what could that possibly be? And then you end up in the spiritual world and you go into stage 2, which is proof and proselytizing, which is, holy crap, this stuff really works. I must tell everyone I know and drag them out to classes with me so they don't think I'm nuts, right? And so that stage then gets people, they often get stuck in that stage and they're going, ooh, crystals, ooh, tarot cards, ooh, angels, ooh, blah, 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 right? And they end up going down these rabbit holes over and over and over again, and they get lost for 2 to 5 years. And so the podcast was designed to take that stage and compress it into 15 to 20 episodes and be like, okay, because every time it's like, okay, but remember, you came here because you weren't happy. Right? Yeah, this is cool, but remember, you came here because you weren't happy. And
yeah,
so
it
it's
brings you
just to
back to
remind
focus.
them to not get
Yeah.
lost in the rabbit holes. And so that was part 1, was to shorten the distance through that stage.
Mm-hmm.
And part 2 was to get them ready to work with me, because I work with people in stage 3 and above. And so, it's giving them all the education they need to have a solid foundation of orientation. So what I'm doing in the podcast is I'm orienting people to the spiritual world so that they can understand it. And I started it at the beginning. It said it was the beginner's guide to energy, magic, and the spirit world. And then my friends started coming in and calling me and saying, oh my God, I love your podcast. Now my friends were like 15, 20 years into their practices. I'm like, why do you love my podcast? It's a beginner's. Why are you even listening to this podcast? It is, you are so bad. And they're like, no, you're taking every 2-hour class I've ever taken in my entire life and stitching it together into a single world view. And I'm like, oh, that's how it works in my head. But I had no idea I was doing that. And so that's when I changed the tagline to your guide to energy, magic, and the spirit world, because I realized that it was for a broader audience than what I had originally thought. And so, that's part of what I'm doing as well, as stitching everything together so that people can see the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
And so, this is what it's about. And I literally, I get people calling me and emailing me and saying, you're my shaman. And I've never met them. And they're like, I've been following you for 7 years and I'm
Wow.
ready to finally talk to you. And I'm like, okay, let's go. Yeah. So speaking of things that spirit has you do, there's a couple of episodes where spirit just came in and took over my mouth and said, and if you're binging right now, then it's time for you to have a discovery call because clearly you're in alignment and you're ready. So let's do it. Right. And I didn't consciously think to do that on those times.
Yeah.
Right. Talk through me. And people called me and were like, I felt like you were talking to me directly. I'm signing up for a discovery call. I'm like, okay, great. Because spirit just talked to them. Right. So
Yes.
it's always entertaining.
And what a good reminder, because I know, I can't remember where I heard it. It was definitely your content, about talking about the value even in going over the stuff that's beginner in terms of like, and it's like when you watch a movie and like, I'm somebody who will rewatch movies all the time,
Yes.
because it's like you get, especially really, I don't want to say like, I'm going to use Lord of the Rings as an example. You could watch that movie over and over and over and over again and still get something different from it every single time that you watch it. And that was
Yes.
something that you talk about in terms of like being a beginner, because there might be something that you missed or something that you forgot or a different perspective or something just lands a little different. So even if it is stuff that you think that you know, and I tend to approach things more from I'm always a beginner. No matter how much I think I know, I am always that I am not a pro in, again, I'm going to watch verbiage here. I think there's always something to learn in every in fact, there was a message today. There is something to learn or teach in every single interaction. It was literally a message today. So thank you for reminding that, there's always something to learn in every single experience, even if you've been doing it for 5 minutes or if you've been doing it for 50 years.
Yeah. Well, and that's because our journeys are a spiral, right?
Mm-hmm.
And our issues are spokes on the spiral. And so when your journey is a spiral, you're constantly coming back and doing the same work at a deeper level, right? And so, you're going to get a different experience of it. And you may have had the experience before, but it's so funny because I do energy readings, right?
Yeah.
And people will get the energy reading and it's like 45 minutes to an hour of me just talking at you, right? And you've had
Mm-hmm.
one of those, so
Yep.
right? And it's like 45 minutes to an hour of just me talking at you about all the stuff. And people will listen to the recordings again and they'll listen 8, 9 times and then they'll call me and say, I just listened for the 10th time and I've heard something that was not here before.
Yeah.
Are you editing these things? And I'm like, no, I'm
Yeah,
not
totally.
editing them. Right? But you weren't ready to hear it. Your brain turned off when it was said because your brain wasn't ready to receive it. And so on the 8th or ninth or 10th run, you're going to hear it now. And
Yeah.
it's a whole new experience because your brain has finally released the fear factor that was holding it in place. Because oftentimes those things are the things that if you hear them, you will change. And if you're not willing to change, then your brain just turns off or it just goes, wah, 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 right?
Mm-hmm.
You become a Charlie Brown adult. And, you just can't parse what's being said.
And that's another really great reminder, because I know for sure in conversations that I've had with people, like, I thought I dealt with this. And I'm like, yeah, there's layers.
Yeah.
You got to
I
think of
can't
yourself
tell
as an
you.
onion, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to, yes, you dealt with a layer, but now it's coming around again because we need to, because if you, and I think you talk about this, like if you just go straight to the core, and I think sometimes when we're talking about life and purpose and what I'm supposed to do, like the way that I love to talk about it is like, if you really saw the entire journey and what it looked like, you wouldn't do it. You would quit, you would talk yourself out of it, you would get scared, you would try to manipulate the situation. Like you would, and I'm saying this very directly to the audience. Think about it. If you knew how complicated something was going to do, or if it was going to make you uncomfortable, you would quit before you even started. And that's not really what the journey is about. Spirit's trying to get you to get in the journey. And our minds really can't conceptualize it. Like that's really the truth. Generally speaking, we can't really conceptualize some of these very large and abstract concepts that are not linear at all, even for definitely not linear.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And here's the thing anytime you are stepping into a spiritual process, you're stepping into an initiatory process.
Mm-hmm.
An initiation, by definition, is you are walking through a doorway that you cannot see what's on the other side. And once you have walked through it, there is no going back. That is the definition of initiation. And so you literally can't see what's on the other side. I remember when I was in my late 20s and I was working with people, I was absolutely committed to this idea that they had to have conscious buy in to the process, that they had to be fully aligned with it and they had to know what was coming and absolutely buy in, right? And that was the biggest load of crap ever because nobody knows what's on the other side of that doorway, right? You can't know. That is the definition of it. To have this conscious buy-in of something that you cannot possibly know what's on the other side is not doable,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yep.
so it was me trying to make sure everybody felt like they were in control, but this is by definition a not controlled process,
Such a
right? And I
fallacy.
hadn't yet accepted that for myself. I was still in
Yep.
stage 3, right? I
Yep.
was still learning for myself. But I was really trying to get it there. And now I'm like, I stand at the threshold of initiation and I initiate powerful people into more power and more sovereignty in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a process of standing as the guardian of the gate and opening the door and saying, do you want to cross over? If you don't want to cross, I'm not going to push you because this is, you have to choose it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I will hold the door open for a while and then I will close it
That is
because
the
you will
conscious
either
buy-in.
walk or you won't,
That
right?
is the
Yeah.
conscious buy-in though,
That's the
right? Is
conscious buy
choosing
in,
to
is the
walk in,
choice.
walk through the door. Yeah,
That's right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Just before I have 2 questions left. How many
Yes.
stages are there?
Right now, I have codified. I'd have to sit and look. I've got 11 are in my book. I think if I sat down to think about it, I've probably personally experienced 12 and 13 in there too. So, but yeah, there are 11 stages and then they cycle for a while. So you go to stage 6, and then from stage 6 through 11, it goes and it cycles back and it goes and it cycles back and it goes. And so you go into a circle on that for a while until you're ready to step out the other side because it iterates. It's a
Yeah,
iterative process of coming to an awareness of who you are, right?
right.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes when people are so really there's constant, well, this is life realistically speaking, constant death and rebirth then through this process because that's why you said the spiral, right? Because you're okay, great, there's 1 layer and then 2 layers and so on and so forth. Okay. Final question.
Mm-hmm.
One juicy nugget, like what's the call to action today to folks? Like where do they what do they do? I mean, you said a lot, so I would say maybe first thing is please like, listen, share this particular podcast, but then go see Kelle and her podcast because there's so much good information. There's so much.
Yeah. Well, and I would also say if you're ready at a deep level, come and talk, to set up a discovery call and talk to me about coming in and doing an apprenticeship program with me where I work with you one-on-one and mentor you through the process. Because when you're in a deep state of evolution, then it's great to have online classes and to do stuff like that, but there's nothing that can be beating having one-on-one mentorship that walks you through specifically what you're going through because when you're at that crucial stage of holy shit, what do I do, that is the moment where having the apprenticeship is possible and most useful. Yeah, come and schedule a discovery call to do that at kellesparta.com.
Thank you. And I think that I would probably further affirm that there's something very comforting about knowing that you are supported and in a safe space while you go through what can be a very, I'm going to use the word scary, but somehow not scary. Because when I called you that day, I was like, I think something's happening.
Right.
But I wasn't scared. I was just like, I think something just didn't quite go according to plan. And there's something, and that's like having a safe playground, so to speak, right? Because you're practicing and you're doing your thing and you're flexing your muscles or working out your muscles. I don't even want to say flexing, but working out. And there's something to be said about having someone that you have a confidence in that can just say, "Oh, okay, yeah, I see what you did. You need to do A, B, C, and X, Y, Z," and away we go, kind of thing. So
Yeah. Well,
I
and
want to close this. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
And one of the benefits of coming and working with me is the very first thing that happens when you sign up with any program with me is that for the length of that program, you've got a little sign in your front yard that says, mess with this person at your own peril because they were under my protection. And so, if you've got things messing with you, then that's a fast path to having some protection and learning how to protect yourself and all of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, the protection, I remember once I had a reader come over to my house. And so she was doing pretty well what you're doing, right? She was talking to my kids about it. And I don't know what we opened up, but at that point in time, one of my kids was having fierce night tremors. And it was just like, and so she'd come over one day. She's like, oh, yeah, there's a portal
Mm-hmm.
not so far from here. And you're trying to do everything you can, but like you said, it's like you're dealing in something unseen. So
Right.
it's very, very different. And we were doing all the things to try and like, buffer him. And I think at some point he was just like, you know what, Mom, I just need to shut this down because
Right.
this is not something that I want to deal with at this point in my life. I was just like, no problem, baby. Like, it's okay. You don't have to. I just wanted you to be aware. I just want to close this by saying thank you, thank you, thank you. I have nothing but gratitude for this experience with you. It has been, I think I told you on the very first call, I'm like, somebody told me I would meet you. And I was like, oh, this is her. I know this is her. So it's been fantastic and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And I said that to you before, but I'm saying it to you again today that I am so glad that I met you. Absolutely was the right timing. And I am excited about the rest of the experience and the journey with you. And so thank you for that. And as well, thank you for joining me on today's episode.
My pleasure. I'm thrilled to be working with you in the work that we're doing together, and I had a great time on the podcast. So thank you.
Yes. And to the audience today, if you enjoyed today's episode, please check out the show notes and look up Kelle on her socials at her website. She's got a ton of information for wherever you are in your journey. Do not be scared. You do not need to be scared. And I think the best part about a lot of your content is it's very digestible. It's not, you can do 2 hours of content. You
No,
can,
sure.
but the pieces are so digestible that you can listen, you can reflect, you can think, you can, you play with it a little bit, you do the theory piece, and then there's the practice piece, and then there's the observe piece, right? If you're talking about it from a very scientific side of things, but it's very, very digestible. So please follow her, like her, whatever you need to do. But if you are at a state where you are not sure where to go next, Kelle Sparta is exactly where you should go. Until next time, thank you so much for joining and take care of yourselves.